Steady, go!
As a parent, you want what's best for your child. You want them to grow up happy, healthy, carefree and safe. But nowadays, the reality can be very different.
We know that British children are amongst the unhappiest in the world. We know that their mental health outcomes are bad and getting worse.
So what's going wrong? Why aren't British children happier? Is it the pressure that parents are under, the long working hours, the family rows, breakups and divorce? Well, I've been meeting families who've been through all that and talking to the experts who are at the forefront of new research to try to improve childhood. And there's a lot they can teach us. I'll be hearing from teenagers who've been affected by their parents working long hours.
We wanted to play with our parents or do something as a family, which we could never do. So it was kind of hard for us, really, just to be a family and be children.
And we'll meet parents worried about leaving their toddlers for long periods in daycare.
His behaviour changed towards me, and I think it was because he just wasn't spending enough time with me, and I almost became a stranger to him.
And I'll be talking to mothers who found it very difficult to love their babies.
I just remember being very stressed, in tears constantly. I just couldn't connect with her.
It's not just parents who are stressed.
Everywhere you turn, being a child and a young adult nowadays, it's high pressured.
So what, as parents, can we do to make sure our children lead happy lives?
If you were to ask children what they want to spend time with their parents, enjoying themselves and laughing with their parents and cooking with their parents and things that don't cost a fortune. Donna McPherson is a single mother. She lives with her two children, Abby and Alex, in Coatbridge, just outside Glasgow. Donna's marriage broke up 3 years ago.
How did you feel about your dad leaving?
Really upset. The night he told us, I came downstairs upset and I talked it to my dog.
You told your dog? Did you? Why did you tell your dog?
Because he was the only one there and I wanted to speak about it.
Oh, and did your dog help you?
Mm-hmm, he gave me a hug.
Did he? Oh.
Good boy.
The separation was hard enough for Abby and Alex, but what made it worse were the arguments between their mum and dad that followed.
How did the girls react when they heard you arguing?
We didn't argue very often, we didn't. But when we did, it was loud. There was nothing nasty or violent, it was just loud. They would come running up to us, holding on, please don't, try to stop us.
Abby, what is it? What was it like when you heard, or what is it like when you hear your mum and dad argue together?
It's just really bad to see them fight. I don't like it.
Soon after their parents split up, the girls started behaving badly. They began fighting physically with each other. It left Donna worrying about how much the rowing with her husband was affecting the children.
They just got angry, so angry. Everything was, from the slightest wee thing to major things. They were kicking off, killing one another, things were getting thrown.
New studies indicate that children who often see their parents rowing can be seriously disadvantaged. As teenagers, they can do worse at school than other kids. And when they grow up, they can be more likely to be drug or alcohol abusers, to suffer major depression, and to face unemployment.
Here's the section.
Childcare guru Penelope Leach has been studying children's development for more than 40 years. She says parents mustn't underestimate the problems of arguing in front of children.
I think it's clear that the impact of conflict on children can be almost as great as the impact of seeing domestic violence, which we now know that seeing it is perhaps not as bad as being part of it, but pretty awful.
Everyone has arguments, of course. It's part of the rough and tumble of family life. When kids do fight, it's soon forgotten. But how can parents who argue a lot protect their children from long-term harm? Justine Roberts, who founded the parenting website Mumsnet, says the key to minimising the trauma for children is to learn how to argue constructively.
Well, let's face it, children are always going to see their parents arguing. I think it would be impossible to sweep every conflict under the table. I mean, the important thing is that they see resolution, I presume, as well. I mean, that's, I think, the way most of us try and deal with it, that if we do fall out, which we will, that they see us, kind of saying sorry, which is, of course, what we're trying to teach them the whole time as well.
The unresolved rowing between Abby and Alex's parents had such a bad impact on their behaviour that their mum took them to see a counsellor to help them work through their problems.
They would come out feeling better, which then made me feel better and made life a bit easier, but it was a long, slow process. At the time I'm thinking, how can counselling help with this? But it made a big difference.
And how much do you two argue now?
Quite a lot. Quite a bit.
You still argue?
Yep.
But do you argue like you used to argue?
No.
So what's the difference now?
Don't kill each other.
Which is always useful.
Family life has changed dramatically in recent decades, and not always for the better. One of the big pressures on Britain's parents today is the problem of combining work with life at home.
50 years ago, the family was very central. The family was a stable unit. It had grandparents and aunts around it. Now, people are working long hours and they move, and they are the victims, really, of the way we run our economy these days.
Nowadays, parents are much more isolated. Many more rely on two incomes to survive, but it can take its toll. The Priddis family live in Barnstable in Devon. 15-year-old Sophie and 13-year-old twins Hannah and Beth became very upset about the long hours their parents were working. What they wanted more than anything was their mum and dad's time and attention.
We wanted to play with our parents or do something as a family, which we couldn't ever do. So it was kind of hard for us, really, just to be a family and be children.
Their mother, Ali Priddis, was working full-time in a demanding job for the Department of Work and Pensions at the local job centre. Their dad, Jeff, is a caretaker at their school, and he often has to work late.
Life was very stressful. I was very tired all the time. My husband was very tired all the time. And we probably had quite a lot of stress and arguments in the family.
The girls were luckier than many teenagers. They were looked after by their grandparents, but they still struggled with their mum working so hard.
When Mum did get home, she was really stressed out, and she didn't really have much time for us because she'd be cleaning the house, washing clothes, just general housework, so we never really saw her that much.
Sometimes, Mum used to come home from work and she used to go sit down straight away and, carry on working. And we'd want to talk to her, but, she'd try and, blank us out so she can still do work. So she was, there, but she wasn't there, really.
In Britain, we work longer hours than in most other European countries. In more than 4 out of 10 families, both parents frequently work evenings and weekends. And excessive working is now being linked to poor mental health and bad behaviour in children. Ali's stressful work life meant that for 13 years the family suffered.
It was just like this constant treadmill, really, and we didn't really get off that treadmill until the kids went to bed.
Their dad, Jeff, has to work until 10 at night every other week. His late shifts only added to the pressures on family life.
Everybody was crying, shouting, screaming, and it was just generally a hellhole in our house. And no one could get a word in edgeways because everybody was shouting at each other.
Sometimes we'd like play up or gang up on Mum sometimes and like be a little bit naughty or just like start screaming or crying because we really wanted attention but we couldn't have it.
I mean, quite often I used to just take myself away and have a good cry in the bed, on my bed, because that was the only way that I could get some time for myself.
Trying to find a balance between work and family life is very, very difficult, as anyone who does it will know. I always thought that the crucial time to be around was when your children are very young, under 5s, like mine are. But more and more people are telling me that the older they get, the more they need you.
A 9, 13, 15-year-old can be left on their own. They can let themselves into the house, get on with what they have to do, kill time until a parent gets home. But that's a very, very lonely, neglected 3.5 hours. There's also evidence of pretty poor outcomes in terms of, I mean, would you be surprised to hear that children left on their own regularly until parents get home from work, do less homework, are more likely to drink alcohol and tend to get themselves into inappropriate sexual situations. I mean, it's not rocket science.
That hasn't happened to the Priddis girls. It was their behaviour in the home that was the problem. But Hannah, Beth and Sophie say they understand how easily teenagers can get into trouble, and they see this where they live.
I think we used to be more naughty when they weren't around, and I think if they still were not around, then we might be like into like smoking maybe, or like get into bad things.
Even picturesque Barnstable has its fair share of problems with drugs and underage drinking, like so many other places in Britain. And the experts say troubled teens are in part a result of the pressured lives that all kinds of parents are increasingly leading.
What my experience tells me is that issues like mental health, drug and alcohol abuse pretty much go across the classes. I mean, I've worked in a lot of private schools, in a lot of elite universities, and the drug and alcohol abuse is just as bad there as it is on the Peckham estate.
To relieve the pressure on family life, Ali went on a parenting course and took up an offer of redundancy. She now works part-time as a teaching assistant and is studying for a degree.
Hiya, you all right? Oh, brilliant. I forgot these were coming. Oh, brill.
It's report day today, and Ali's there ready to read them as soon as the girls get home. They're a lot happier.
Well in line with your target grade. That's really good.
That's fine.
Well done, Hannah. An excellent year so far. That is really, really good. Are you pleased with that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Just to know that their mum's going to be home when they get home from school is good. And it's certainly improved, I think, mine and my husband's relationship as well.
The Priddis family were able to change their working lives before the problems escalated. Many British parents face the same issues, and the importance of giving teenagers the family time they need to grow up healthy and happy is now being stressed.
Well, some very wise Mumsnet members often say, actually, that's the time you should give up work, is when your kids, enter into teenage years, because actually it's about being around then as much as anything. You can't say, I'm going to be there from 6:30 to 7:30 for you and hope that your teenager happens to want to speak to you then. You need to sort of have that time to hang out and be available. So again, I think our long hours culture it makes it hard to parent. Put it like that.
A number of British schools are also recognising how important it is for parents just to be there for their children. They know it can help prevent problems with kids' behaviour.
Well, here in
Brighton, one school is working with parents and their children to try to strengthen the family bond. Once a week at Fairlight School, parents take over the kitchen and cook for each other. It's one of 40 schools around the country taking part in a new American scheme called FAST, which stands for Families and Schools Together. Every parent is invited to join, and the programme's all about learning to create time and space for their children. You've got catering for 40 people, are you?
Yeah, that's right.
40 parents and kids?
Yep. It's all great fun.
But this is all a part of you working with the children, giving them your time and spending a bit of quality time with them.
Because obviously we don't leave here till quite late, so it's quite good that the kids and the parents both get a really good meal before they go home. And then that way, when you go home, it's easy. You can just bath the kids and put them into bed.
Great. Now what?
This way.
You're going to say hello now, and every family is just going to introduce themselves.
This is Harley, this is Ewan, and this is Mummy, and we're the Drew family.
What's the name of Mummy?
Michelle Drew has 2 boys and another child on the way. She's found parenting difficult at times, and the scheme's mix of play, one-on-one time with her children, and an opportunity to talk to other parents has been a huge help. Before you started doing this, what was it like then?
It was, I could honestly say, hard at times. Honestly, I just wanted to pull my hair out at times, honestly. But I think that's normal for being a parent. But he just didn't listen. He was just out of control, just always wanting to do what he wants.
Mum, can we trap this monster?
Yeah, that's what you want to do.
Can you help me though?
During the session, parents have to spend 15 minutes focusing all their attention on their child. They can't tell them what to do, tell them off, or criticise. The child takes the lead, and the parent has to follow. Finding pockets of time like that, no phones, computers or TVs, is something they're also encouraged to do at home, and it's harder than you think. But the head teacher believes giving your time is vital. Are kids getting enough attention from their parents, do you think?
I think parents set out to give their kids attention, but they don't always do it by giving them quality time.
What does quality time mean, though? People talk about that all the time.
I think it's, if you were to ask children what they want to spend time with their parents, and they don't have to be taken off to go off and do all these fantastic trips and go into all these places that cost money. They actually want to spend time enjoying themselves and laughing with their parents and cooking with their parents and things that don't cost a fortune.
Is that a double Z?
Jackie Walker is one of the organisers here. The programme was originally started to tackle the problems caused by our modern lifestyles. The Save the Children Fund is now planning to set up 400 FAST schemes in British schools.
If you look at all the figures, we know that British children are amongst the unhappiest in the world. We know that their mental health outcomes are bad and getting worse.
The people who are running the scheme say it's the parents who are the key to making things better for their children.
We're led by what they want. So our whole purpose is to empower parents, if you like, to get them to remember and retrieve their authority and their dignity as parents.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Families and schools.
Michelle's halfway through the 8-week scheme, and already it's made a huge difference.
Now it's great because at school he's more comfortable, he's happy in himself. The teacher doesn't come out to me now and doesn't say, look, he's being naughty today. It's just about, when she comes out, she smiles at me. So it's great. So I know that I've achieved something.
British family life has been transformed over the past 60 years. The traditional family unit, the married mum and dad living with their children, has given way to step-parents, gay parents, and above all else, single parents. Nowadays, 22% of children are being brought up in single-parent families headed by a lone mother. The consequences of family breakup are often very tough for children. Up to about a third of kids whose parents separate never see their dad. For a child, losing contact with your father must be very difficult to deal with. But it's only recently become clear just how problematic absent dads can be, especially for their daughters. Hannah was the first girl in her class to start her periods while she was still at primary school.
When I was at school, I was the only one who started my periods when I was 9. I just turned 9. And nobody else at school knew anything about them, and it was quite hard for me because I felt alone really at school, not being able to talk about it, you know, stomach cramps, I fainted a lot. It was just really quite a stressful time.
Hannah grew up without her dad. She's only met him twice.
I think it has affected me not having my father there. I don't think there's any way that it couldn't affect me. Growing up with just my mum, I think has given me a certain point of view, a certain kind of personality, and maybe I do lack having like a masculine guide there. I wish I could say that it hasn't made any difference, but I'm pretty sure it has.
Growing up without your father can make a very big difference. Researchers have found that girls whose fathers abandon them when they're under 5 can get their periods much earlier than other girls. And as they get older, these girls can be more likely to get into trouble at school, to use drugs and alcohol, and get involved in violent behaviour. Professor Jay Belsky is one of several child development specialists who've been looking into the effect that absent dads can have on the daughters they leave behind.
We know that girls who mature earlier than others are more likely to get involved in sex, drugs, and rock and roll because, if you excuse the expression, their tits and ass attract the older boys who lure them into, you know, quote, more problem behavior. We also know that early immaturity is related to all sorts of health risks in girls in middle age, including breast cancer. So in that sense, reductions in timing of puberty carry their own health risks beyond behavioral and psychological risks.
In fact, for Hannah, being different from the other girls developing early led specifically to serious self-esteem problems.
I stopped eating at one point because I was frightened I was fat and ugly and I didn't feel accepted. So there's a strong possibility that came from, you know, starting puberty early. All these things that were happening to me when I was so young turned into this disorder where I hated myself.
Growing up without a dad can be stressful for boys too, and cause problems for them in later life. Penelope Leach says dads are vital, and we need to trumpet that.
If you've had your father closely involved in your life when you were a child, and there's one big study of when you're 16, the difference that makes is astronomical in terms of the likelihood that you'll have a good job, the likelihood that you'll make a satisfactory marriage, the likelihood that you won't end up in prison and so on. Out of nothing but having a father who is involved.
Over the past 50 years, there's been another change in family life that's added to the pressures on British parents. There's been a big rise in the number of working women. In fact, stay-at-home mums are now in the minority. Up to 70% of mothers with children under the age of 1 now go to work. That's almost 3 times as many as in the early 1980s. I'm a working mum, just one of thousands of women who juggle work, children, and a fair amount of guilt on a daily basis. But when you work, you need childcare, and that is expensive. For a lot of people, nurseries are often the cheapest and only option. But now there are new worries about the effect that long hours in daycare can have on the behaviour of young children.
Who's that?
Philippa Brewer-Diel has 2 children, 3-month-old Charlie and 4-year-old Keen. After she had Keen, she had to go back to work. At first, a childminder looked after her son.
When I first went back to work, I felt I missed out on quite a bit. I missed his first proper word. I missed his first proper steps. And they're massive things for a child that you can't do your first step again. You can't have your first word again. And it was awful, picking up from the childminder and them saying, he walked by himself today. And it's like, I'm really happy, but I'm so sad because I missed that. And that was one massive thing I really wanted to be there for.
Do you think I can fit my hand through?
At the age of 2, Keen was moved from the childminder to a day nursery.
When I went full-time, he started going from 8:15 till 6 o'clock, so it was quite a long day for him. But I mean, he thrived on it and he loved it. It became harder for him when I became an assistant manager, and then he started going from 7:30 till 6, and that extra hour was quite a long time for him. His behaviour changed towards me. He didn't want to start coming home with me. And I think it was because he just wasn't spending enough time with me, and I almost became a stranger to him. Even being his mum, I was almost a stranger to him.
Help me, mummy, help me.
Some academics have been sounding warnings about the downside of nursery care.
The more hours that accumulate across the infancy, toddler and preschool years, collectively, the more aggressive and disobedient children are likely to be, again on average, when they enter school. I think it's really important, however, that we don't make it sound like we're creating axe murderers or psychopaths. There's no evidence of that going on.
So get in there.
What's hotly debated by academics is just how much time a young child needs to spend in daycare and at what age to risk getting these problems. Philippa reduced her working hours and things improved, but she's worried about Keen now he's at school.
We have had some concerns about his behaviour. He became quite aggressive and quite angry towards a lot of people, especially towards myself and towards Darryl, my partner. He became quite aggressive to all of them, really, and it flowed over and it went over into school, and it became a point where the school were concerned. The length of time he spent in childcare, I think, might have had an impact on his behaviour. More so, I think it would probably have an impact on the way he builds relationships as he gets older.
Keen's behaviour is getting better, but some experts are now worried about what happens to kids who've spent a lot of time in daycare when they start school. They say new research shows they can make other children behave badly, even those who've never been in daycare. Jay Belsky says their bad behaviour spreads through the classroom like a virus.
Probably the most interesting thing, I think, is what comes out of some related American research I've done with other colleagues, in which we looked at what happens when you have a reception classroom that has lots of children with extensive childcare experience versus classrooms which have many fewer kids with extensive childcare experience. And what you see is kind of a contagion effect, so that the more kids there are in the room with more childcare experience, the more aggressive and disobedient all the children in the room are.
So there's a ripple effect.
Exactly.
And Jay Belsky warns that the picture could be worse here than in America, where he did the studies.
Now, one of the interesting things here is that we found this collective contagion effect in American reception classes where the average class size is 20. Here in the UK, the average class size is 30. Raises the interesting question, could the same thing be going on even in a larger scale?
So it's for the grown-ups here, isn't it? Children drive.
Shall I sit here with Sophie?
And the grown-ups sit in the back.
You drive.
You're going to drive us then?
Drive.
Can you drive, Fazel?
Mama, sit down.
Oh, that's a good idea. Shannon Summersby and Alistair Swaffer have 2-year-old twins, Charlotte and Fraser. Like millions of people in Britain, they're full-time working parents, wanting to do their best for their children. The twins go to a local nursery, and their parents firmly believe it has been a positive experience for them.
They really, really enjoy it. And I think it's also great that they get to meet other children. They get to interact, they learn how to share, how to disagree, how to solve disagreements. And all in all, I think it's a very, very positive experience. Really, I do.
Shannon and Alistair's kids have been going to nursery from 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening since they were 4 months old. But Shannon challenges any idea that going into daycare so young might be problematic for the twins.
In terms of daycare, nothing winds me up more than when someone tries to tell me how to raise my kids. Because no one knows our kids apart from us.
So, are they right not to be worried? Some academics believe that the concerns raised about nursery care come from American research, where they say the quality of care isn't as good. But they also agree that if you send babies under the age of 1 to daycare for long periods of time, it can lead to problems with behaviour. But how do you know if a toddler's tantrum is just that, a phase, or if it's down to long hours in daycare?
Do you find that there are behavioural problems that your twins pick up?
There are behavioural traits that they pick up, but I'm not sure how much of that they pick up because they're at nursery and how much they just develop because they're of a certain age. I mean, we've all heard of the terrible twos. You get terrible twos whether they go to nursery or whether they stay at home. They can be temperamental little blighters, can't they?
Is one more tricky than the other? Or not?
Yeah. Yes. Fraser is going through a particularly trying stage at the moment. But
and what's he doing?
He's very angry about many things. He shouts and screams. The answer is no, no matter what the question is or whatever you say. But he'll get over it. I'm sure he will.
He will, and the nursery staff say that a group of boys all went through this at the same time. They're all exiting it. They told us to look out for Charlotte to go through it now, so we're looking forward to that. Oh. Do you want the green one? Yeah. Do you want the purple one? Yeah.
Shannon and Alistair firmly believe nursery care is not damaging their children, that any behaviour problems are just a stage they're going through, and they're happy with the time the twins spend there.
Do you not feel guilty? And I'm only asking that because I walk out of the house every day. I feel guilty. I question, working and being a working mother. I always question it, and I very often feel guilty.
No.
I don't feel guilty at all.
I don't ever feel guilty.
Men often don't, though, I've noticed. I'm not Shannon. Shannon, do you feel guilty?
I feel guilty when they're not well, obviously. If they've got a cold, they can still go to nursery. If they have a fever, obviously they stay home. I feel guilty because occasionally you think, when have you needed me? And I wasn't there. But for the most part, when we drop them off at nursery, they're really happy. They wave goodbye and they honestly go off with their friends.
There's ducks. Yeah? Oh, there's some there. There's some geese. Who then should parents listen to if they are thinking about putting their children in nursery care? Some experts say it can be a positive experience. The children sent to good nurseries can be up to 6 months ahead of other kids when they reach school age.
High-quality preschool education does all children a lot of good. And the consequences for disadvantaged children are particularly important. And if we want the biggest bang for our buck, as it were, we should invest in high-quality preschool education.
Or should parents listen to the critics who say the good side of nursery care might be drowned out by the problems?
All the effects of daycare we're talking about, good, bad, and indifferent, are modest in magnitude, and that perspective may be right. However, there's another point of view, and that is that we've got more and more children at younger and younger ages, or so it would appear, spending lots of time in childcare. Think about cars in a city. No one car contributes to the pollution of the air in London. What creates poor air in London is all the cars. And so by the same token, if we have more and more children being adversely affected to a little extent, that can accumulate and have neighborhood, community, even societal consequences, perhaps.
The
problem is no one can tell you conclusively if nurseries are good or bad for young children. At the end of the day, you've just got to make your own mind up. But there's nothing worse than the constant question marks, particularly if daycare is your only option. Daycare is a very big issue, isn't it? And it is for a lot of people their only option. Yet you hear these messages over and over again. Is daycare good? Is it harming your child? Is it encouraging bad behaviour? It's a terrible dilemma for parents.
I think what Mumsnetters would say to that is, really do check around. Do your research as far as you can within the choices that you have. Make sure that you're as comfortable as you can with the choice you've made, because there is good daycare and bad daycare in the same way that there are good childminders and bad childminders. So do ask around and check.
In a way, it seemed so much easier 50 years ago when most mothers stayed at home to look after their children. Hardly any daycare or creches or childminders, just family. But even stay-at-home mums can unwittingly create problems for their children.
All right, then go on, then you do it. But don't slip. You see how the floor is slippery?
6 years ago, Jadine Flanders found she had real problems bonding with her newborn son, Jaden. She was doing all the practical things for him, but inside she felt numb.
There was just a mental block there. I was doing all the right things, like breastfeeding and changing the nappies, changing his clothes when he needed, everything that like a new mum's supposed to do. But it was kind of robotic, that sort of thing. I think because I weren't feeling happy in myself, it was hard to, I couldn't even pretend to be happy. So it just made it even worse and just harder to bond.
A sharp-eyed health visitor realised that Jadine was feeling very pressured by her baby and sent her to see consultant psychotherapist Amanda Jones. She showed me some video footage shot when Jadine first came to see her.
Don't make noise, we're dancing. I look stressed out. I just look so... I know at that time I'm probably just feeling so numb and just doing what I'm supposed to be doing or what I think I'm supposed to be doing, but it doesn't feel like there's like a real connection there.
Jaden was showing really worrying signs from my point of view, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Jaden, because he was actually found it very difficult to focus looking at his mum's face.
Yeah.
In actual fact, he really kind of avoided.
He looked away.
He could see his mum was unhappy.
Mothers who can't form a strong emotional bond with their babies can bring up children with quite extreme behaviour problems.
He might have harboured a deep sense of resentment and possibly hostility towards female in the future, and one's biggest fear then was he might then feel a propensity to take his anger or aggression out on future female relationships. So he could have possibly developed into quite a disruptive little boy. Maybe, the trajectory could have actually been very different.
Where are you going? What are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing? Oh my. Oh no, why didn't you say so?
So this is a few months later.
Yeah.
And the difference is amazing, isn't it?
I know, his eyes are so bright, he looks so happy.
Where are you going? Where are you going?
So why is the bond between mother and baby so very important to a child's future development?
Okay.
The childcare expert Penelope Leach has been researching and writing about the importance of bonding since the 1960s. Her new book looks at what she calls the essential first year. It's essential, she says, because a baby's brain cannot develop properly with a parent who is emotionally not there for the child.
Babies don't make their own brains. It isn't just a matter of getting older. It isn't just a matter of genetics or development. It's a matter of building it with the person you're attached to. Usually your mother, but not necessarily your mother, and also your father. And the way you behave with the baby dictates what kind of brain, and eventually what kind of person, what kind of child, what kind of teenager, dare I say it, maybe one day what kind of parent that person's going to be.
Jadine's problems are far from unique. Up to 20% of mums suffer from postnatal depression, which can prevent mothers from bonding with their babies. And what's tragic for mothers who can't form a close emotional bond with their baby is that their own mothers may well have struggled with this too, and the problem is being passed from generation to generation.
Do you feel like your mother was sort of, I suppose, emotionally absent for you or not?
It's not really through her own fault, but sometimes I just felt like, oh, maybe she just doesn't really care about me as much as she cares for the others.
It's like a ghost in the nursery that comes back to haunt you, and nobody warns you it's going to happen. But certainly when Jadine's mother had Jadine, I think she had very little support, but also no sense really that she had much good to give her baby. And then what I saw with Jadine was a sense of this young woman who thought she wanted to be a mother, but who then, when she was actually faced with holding her baby, wasn't getting the feelings that she wanted to come alive. And there were quite a few parallels in their history, actually, which we teased out over time, that did show that there was a repeating pattern.
The problems caused by this repeating pattern can be very real. It can blight children's lives again and again. Rates of self-harm are growing in the UK. About 1 in every 15 young people in Britain is so distressed they deliberately hurt themselves. Psychiatrists now think that the origins of the problem can, in part, be found in mothers who feel pressured by their babies and did not bond with them. At the Anna Freud Centre in London, researchers are comparing the brains of young people to find out exactly why poor bonding, they call it poor attachment, can lead to psychological problems for teenagers like self-harming.
Self-harm is undoubtedly on the rise. How much of that is due to changes in patterns of parenting, we don't know. What we do know is that self-harm itself is largely an indication of the disorganization of the attachment system. That is, people self-harm when they feel emotionally out of control.
And people are cutting their arms, and that's very common, isn't it?
Cutting arm, to feel the pain, to reassure themselves at moments when their sense of identity fails, that actually they physically exist.
So these are children who you suspect would have had problems bonding in their first couple of years?
For whom bonding in some respect or other did not work fully. In most middle-class schools, there could be as many as 5 to 10% of kids who have self-harmed in the recent past.
Mothers who find it difficult to bond with their babies are found right across the social spectrum. Rich or poor, it's not a problem that is confined to any one part of society. Nikki lives in Glasgow. She's got a good job and a good marriage. But when she had her first child, Grace, she suddenly couldn't cope.
I just remember being very stressed, in tears constantly, thinking, what am I supposed to do with her? She's crying, I've fed her, I've burped her. Now what? I just couldn't connect with her, and she's obviously just been born and just probably wants a cuddle, to be with, close to someone, preferably her parents, and I couldn't do it.
Nikki was referred by her GP to Glasgow psychologist Christine Puckering. She showed me footage she'd filmed of Nikki with Grace when she was 8 weeks old.
But if you look at Nikki's face, Nikki looks quite frightened.
Yes, she does. She looks really Yeah, you can see it in her eyes, can't you?
Well, and the turn of her mouth as well. And so Grace is looking at her face, it's a frightened face. And that's not very comfortable. And so she's choosing not to look.
So yeah, but look at that face.
Absolutely, she looks at me in absolute horror.
Yeah, she does. I don't really know what to do.
On video, what you could see very clearly was that she didn't feel comfortable relating to Grace. She looked after her perfectly well, all her needs were catered for, but when it came to interacting with her, when it came to smiling at her, laughing at her, playing with her, she took no pleasure in it, and so it didn't happen.
Like Jadine, Nikki also feels it was her upbringing that contributed to the problems she faced with her baby.
I wasn't abused, I wasn't beaten up, there was always food in the house, so it was nothing, there was nothing physical, but I would say mental...
Emotional absence?
Yes, definitely.
And so your fear, having a baby, was that you might repeat all this again?
History repeating itself,
Imitating whatever she does.
But the good news is, history doesn't have to repeat itself. Professor Lane Strathern has been searching for a cure for mothers who can't bond with their babies. He's been using the latest imaging techniques to see what happens when they look at photos of their child. And what he found was fascinating. Basically, how a woman treats her child depends on how she was treated as a baby. So if you show a woman who bonded well with her mother a photo of her child, a part of her brain lights up, the bit that makes her react to her child. But if you do the same to a woman who didn't bond with her mother, that bit just doesn't light up.
In the mothers with what's called insecure or dismissing attachment, we saw a very different pattern of brain activation. When she sees her baby crying, instead of having this approach response, it may trigger pain or distress or discomfort.
So distance her from the child rather than draw her to it.
That separates her from her child.
So the mother needs the help and needs to be taught to do it. Right. Professor Strathern says his brain imaging research could one day pave the way for a medical treatment to help women overcome the faulty brain circuits that prevent them from bonding with their babies. Until then, talking therapy is their best hope. Nikki was in therapy for 3 months.
Christine would come up every week or every fortnight and she would film different parts and we would have wee tasks, to do with Grace, play with a toy or, try and talk to her and things. And it didn't happen straight away. It really didn't. It took a long time. But I think without Christine's help and without being involved in the programme, as I've said to John and other people, I don't think I would be in this house. I think I would have just packed my stuff and gone because I couldn't do it. Grace, your casserole, you want to put some sauce in your casserole? With your carrots.
Grace is now 2 and the family are very close.
Do you want to do some?
And would you have another one?
Yes.
You're thinking you'd have another one?
Yes.
Really? After all that?
After all that,
Amazing.
That's definitely, I really, really want to. That's definitely in the plans, The quicker the better.
Jadine has had 3 more children since she met her current partner, Dean.
You can read Tesco. Don't tell me you can read as well.
Yeah, it's
3.5 years old and you can read.
She says therapy helped her to be a much more confident mother, and she's always alert to her eldest son's need for love and attention.
So do you now feel very much that you started out with your first child as a mother who was physically there, and you have always been physically there as a mother?
Yeah.
But emotionally you weren't?
Exactly.
Whereas now, completely different.
Yeah, I'm physically there, but emotionally I'm just 100%, there's been 100% difference in between then and now, I think.
Do you think that really has had an impact on him now as a 6-7-year-old?
Yeah, I do, because Jaden needs a lot of reassurance and a lot of guidance, and sometimes he needs help with his own feelings as well. He is the most insecure of all of my children. I need to constantly tell him that I love him. I need to constantly tell him he's a good boy and he's done this well and he's done that well.
whereas I don't really have to do that with the rest of the children. And if I do, it just comes naturally, not because I've gone out of my way to do it or anything like that.
Water can be hot.
Good boy.
Amanda keeps in touch and is pleased with how Jayden is doing.
In terms of just a little 6-year-old boy, he's integrated really well at school, and he seems to be a little boy who feels good about himself and feels he's got something important to say. So when I saw him recently, he was just full of chat and full of a sense of kind of, yeah, feeling pretty good in himself.
With many parents struggling and under pressure, schools provide an important support system. Some are actively stepping in to try to prevent problems before they start.
So if children do miss out in the early years, can they ever catch up? Can they learn about bonding and about empathy? Well, I've come to the Isle of Man where they're trying out a scheme to do just that.
How are you? Hello, baby Noah, and how are you? How are you today?
How do you think Noah's feeling today? Wasim, how do you think he's feeling? I think he's happy. No, he's happy.
Meet baby Noah.
Do you think he's grown a bit since last time we saw him? Do you think so? Gosh, I think so. You see?
The Roots of Empathy programme is running in Onken School. It's for all children in an age group, and this class of 6- and 7-year-olds are getting regular visits from Noah. The kids sit and watch him to see how he communicates. They help measure him and work out what he needs for different activities.
You pull it a little bit tighter. What's the measurement by his head? Can you read it? That one? The children get to see the baby reach different milestones over the year. They get to take him on as their baby. He is the class baby. They watch the relationship between him and his mum and how they've got attachment to each other. And the baby explains in a way we never could. He's the teacher. So he teaches us about how you can communicate without using words. When Noah's face changes, the children describe exactly how he's feeling. And that's just brilliant. That describes it better than I ever could. Clap hands, daddy to come. Bring little Noah a cake and a plum, a cake with a currant, a plum with...
Roots of Empathy has been a huge success in Canada, where it started. The programmes help to improve children's social skills and to reduce bullying and antisocial behaviour. It's a long-term strategy designed to improve parenting skills in the next generation and to break cycles of poor parenting. The Isle of Man is introducing it into all its schools, and there's interest in it from the British mainland.
What's he trying to tell us now? What will happen if we leave him? Does he get into a cry?
He would start to cry.
Shall we help him?
Yeah.
You don't like to hear him cry?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Did we do that to you?
The head teacher says the scheme gives the children quiet time for reflection, which can be rare in their hectic lives.
Does Roots of Empathy really work? Does it make a difference here?
Sometimes you will find that certain children that you just didn't think would quite latch on quite so much, they are just totally in awe. And it is truly, truly wonderful. And you see them develop the real empathy with each other.
There we go.
Alexander Jacobson is one of the many children who are enjoying the scheme. His mum values it too.
I think it's a very good idea. What I think is really important for children today is to talk, as sometimes we don't have time to talk or we don't appreciate the importance of talking to each other.
How are you all feeling? Can we show our thumbs? How are you feeling today? Wasim, you're really happy. Alexander, why are you happy?
On Friday, I do need to wear armbands. I need to have a float.
Wow, you're all coming on with your swimming. That's really good. Are you feeling a bit sad, Kayla? What's the matter?
Because my teeth is always hurting me.
Oh, have you been to the dentist? It's not that long since.
Do you think it's much harder being a child nowadays?
I think so. There are far higher expectations. They've got so much, there's so much pressure on children nowadays. There really is.
Goodbye, Noah. Goodbye, Noah.
Whether it's when they're going home and they're going to activity clubs, whether it's doing things at the weekends, whether it's because of family circumstances, they're spending part of the time with one parent and another part of the week with another parent. Everywhere you turn, being a child and a young adult nowadays, it's high pressured.
Many of us lead hectic lives. We put ourselves and our children under pressure. So what can we learn from nations where children fare better than they do here?
If you look at the Scandinavian countries, they have a much more socially aware, shall we say, way of responding to families. I certainly know that they have much better support for single-parent families. They have much better support for children who have working mothers. So all of those systems work to actually support the family.
It's really nice.
Katarina Jacobson is from a Scandinavian country. She's from Sweden, and she says parents must find ways of reducing the pressures on their lives so that family life can flourish.
I definitely think we need to be aware of how we feel when we come home, that we do not let our work carry with us when we open the door when we come home, instead of being all tired and get that down feeling, that we have to appreciate being at home and appreciate that the time that we have together with our family, both with the parents and also with our children, to allow to be a happy moment when we come home and to be able to spend time together.
And childcare experts say the government must help as well to tackle the problems families are facing, especially when it comes to that tricky issue of work-life balance.
There's a million ways we could help, and we don't because the whole conflict between home and work is like an elephant sitting in the middle of our society. We're walking round him, we're nibbling at the edges. Nobody is saying, look, this isn't working. You can't both be at home with a child and be out earning the money to spend on a child, let alone if your own mother is losing her marbles the other side of the country. We've got to find a way of bringing these things together, and we could.
Like so many others, Shannon and Alistair want to do all they can to make sure their children grow up happy, healthy and secure.
I want our kids to look back and it to be so kind of calm and stable, above all stable, that they think it was almost boring. I will think we have succeeded when they say, you know, our mum and dad were so boring. That would be great. I would love that. It would be, to me, it would be a sign that they didn't have a turbulent upbringing. They had all the support that they needed. They feel loved and secure and happy, and that's what I want. Then I will have succeeded as a mum, and then we will have succeeded as a family.
Bye, darling. Bye, Thursday. See you in the morning.
It's a wish that will be shared by many parents who are facing the challenges of modern life.
Next tonight, Jeremy Paxman's in charge of another quarter-final clash with University Challenge. Then on BBC 2 in half an hour, we're learning to cook like a top chef as Raymond Blanc shares his kitchen secrets for working with lamb. Over on BBC 3 now, it's not so much about lamb, more about ladies who are sure they're hotter than their daughters.